Good afternoon. I'm going to give some folks a little bit of time to jump on before I start. All righty. I think we got a good group. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, From the Mountains to the Bay, a Virginia Insider Update, featuring CVF's own Peggy Sanner. I'm Laura Luoma. I'm the Associate Director of Stewardship. I'll be your host today. Hope that everyone is happy and healthy, as are their families. I'm delighted to be here with you for this virtual event. Before I interview Peggy, just a couple housekeeping items. First, I know we have a group from across the Commonwealth, and I think we have some visitors from outside Virginia as well. So if everyone wouldn't mind using the chat function at the bottom of your screen, and just saying where you are, and let's see where folks are. I'm at CBF's headquarters in Annapolis, Maryland. And then let's see if we get some chats on here. Feel free to tell me where you are. All right, Suffolk, Virginia, Glen Allen, Annandale, Midlothian. We have someone from Cumberland, Maine. May Fox in Richmond, Saluda, Virginia. April in Virginia Beach. Will Baker coming to us from Baltimore. Hi, Will. Fantastic. All righty. We'd love to get your questions throughout the presentation. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of them. At the bottom of the screen is a Q&A function. Please, throughout the presentation, feel free to put in as many questions as you want. Hopefully we'll get to those all at the end of Peggy's presentation once we get to that portion. So, you're going to hear a lot of good stuff today, and I am so pleased to be able to introduce Peggy to you right now. She is our Virginia Executive Director. She's been with CBF for 11 years, first as a staff attorney. She oversees all aspects of the Virginia office, including managing Richmond, Hampton roads, and our field staff. She also acts as an environmental advocate for CBF in Virginia, overseeing policy and advocacy efforts in the state. She is a liaison with the state legislator, business community, and other conservation organizations, and represents CBF to the media and general public. As an attorney, she also provides legal counsel on CBF's activities in Virginia. We at CBF are so lucky to have her on our team, and I'm so excited to let her talk to you about what's going on in Virginia. Peggy?
Hi, Peggy. This is Alice, your production manager. We have a little gray box on your screen. I think you might have a chat function open on your screen. We just have up in the left-hand corner.
I don't know what I need to do.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure how we're gonna fix this. Okay. So do you have, all right, so we're running into a little bit of a technical issue. So what I can do, Peggy, is upload the PowerPoint and share from my screen for you to speak from. Because we actually have a part of the screen that's been compromised. And so I'm not sure if you have a chat pulled down or a different message box pulled down, or we can go ahead and move forward. So I will, Peggy, great. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? And Peggy, I'll let you roll through the program.
All right, I'll be happy to get started. I can't hear your questions too well. So if you need to make a suggestion on the presentation, please text it. But let me then commence. I am really delighted to be here today. I am grateful to you, Laura, for very kind words. Most of all, I'm grateful to all of you for being here today so that I can share with you some of the great things CBF is doing in Virginia that I think make us all proud. So we'll start off just to orient all of us with a few words on the state of the Bay. You all know that CBF has been working to restore the Bay for these 50+ years. And I think you know that we've been doing it for the last 10 years pursuant to the guidance and the limits and the framework established by the Chesapeake Bay Blueprint. What we have done this year, we do this on a periodic basis, is to review our progress in meeting those blueprint goals. And in particular, we focus on Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, the three states that account for about 90% of bay pollution. We calculate the pollution reductions that have been achieved both on a statewide basis and on a sector-specific basis in each state. We examine the extent to which each of our states has implemented the practices and programs set out in their 2-year milestone goals. So it's a lot of work. It's very revealing, and it provides us a guideline for moving forward. The key takeaway this year, I think for our purposes, is that Virginia and also Maryland are currently on track to meet our 2025 blueprint nitrogen and phosphorus reduction goals. That's great news. In both states, this success is largely due to long-term work in upgrading wastewater treatment plants. The less bright, but rather more sobering news is that, certainly in Virginia, unless we see significant acceleration of work in all spheres, in agriculture, in stormwater management in our developed areas, and in continued work in the wastewater sector, unless we do that, we will not achieve our goals by 2025. We haven't given up hope. Far from it. Virginia's watershed implementation plan is very strong, and the commitment to achieve the goals is there, both on a citizen level, on an activist level, but I think we are seeing more and more the commitment continues to be strong at the decision maker level. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. It is clear Virginia must work harder, and that's going to mean substantial increases in appropriations. It's going to mean substantial and continued efforts in actually making our programs work on the ground. So what I'd like to do right now is turn to what we are doing in Virginia to push that process along so that we can meet our goals. I'm going to start, as the title indicates, with the practices that we are encouraging and accelerating in our very large and important agricultural communities. To start off in that sector with looking at our Mountains to the Bay Grazing Alliance. This is a regional group spearheaded by Chesapeake Bay Foundation to promote better grazing management. Why do we do that? Well, the process of converting practices from growing corn for feed, to grazing, to planting grass, the practice of moving from continuous grazing on one tractor field to a carefully calibrated rotational process. This yields numerous ecosystem benefits. It allows for greater capture of rainfall on the field, reducing stormwater runoff of nutrients and sediments into our streams. It helps to cycle nutrients and build healthy soil through vigorous vegetation growth. It makes farms more resilient to weather extremes like drought and heavy rainfall, and it helps reduce greenhouse gases by providing more organic matter that can sequester carbon in the soil. It reduces the amount of fertilizer that's needed, and it distributes manure across a wider area instead of allowing it to concentrate near waterways or feedlots. Farmers like it. You can find lots of scientific studies that conclude this is a better management system for our farm operations. But what really matters from our perspective is that farmers recognize the benefits of the process. Here's what one farmer said. The greatest benefit to me is the cost savings, the simplicity and sustainability. There are added benefits of prepping the pasture for renovation and the fact that you can see the cattle so much better on ground level than on a tractor. Another farmer said, the biggest thing I saw firsthand was how easy and effective winter grazing can be. In comparison to my hay feeding years, it was easier, quicker, and cheaper. Strip grazing, part of the process, most certainly paid for itself. And based on this experience, I plan on making the transition to do this for all the cattle on the farm. So this is a really gratifying set of responses for a lot of hard work that our restoration staff are doing. But we are ensuring that the message gets out in a lot of ways. We do farmer outreach at every level. Here is one of the things that we're doing. Our staff, twice a year, have been convening grazing roundtables, which are on-site opportunities for local farmers to ask questions of their peers, to get answers from their peers in terms of their own experience. This is a very effective way to make sure the message is actually trusted. We also have hosted, particularly in non-COVID years, trips taking graziers to the bay and other farmers to the bay. Typically, these trips are about 15 to 20 participants, farmers and agricultural professionals. They have had the opportunity of staying overnight on Port Isabel. They have the opportunity to talk with other farmers, to talk with our agricultural restoration scientists, and to have some real exposure to life from the perspective of the waterman community. What we have seen arising from this trip and these trips every year is a deeper appreciation of the similarities and interconnection between farmers and watermen. But as I indicated, COVID has changed some of the practices that we do, and we need to redouble our efforts to ensure that the message gets out. We have lots of ways of doing that. We produce quarterly grazing newsletters and annual grazing planners distributed to about 300 farmers and agricultural professionals on a regular basis. We work with partners to host field days and grazing schools. And we also pilot and introduce some innovative and practical technology to help the message become clear. You can do this too. What we see here is Matt Kowalski, a Virginia restoration scientist, who is standing in front of and talking about one of the examples of this innovative technology. This is a solar power trough and watering system, which is flexible and transportable. And it is used by Matt and his colleague, Austin Horn, to show farmers and agricultural operators how to address situations like transporting cattle in a rotational grazing process from and into fields that may not have direct access to streams. This system shows how farmers can try out alternative watering systems, and it shows them in many cases that they can do it too. Many farmers, in fact, want to see before they commit entirely to a rotational grazing practice how it would work on their own farm. We also find that this kind of technology, a flexible, transportable, solar-powered watering system, is really helpful in encouraging farmers to adopt another very important practice in Virginia, and that is excluding cattle from streams. This is critical in protecting our local streams from pollution related to cattle, feces, and urine. But if you exclude cattle from streams, you need to know that they will have another watering source. And so this is technology that helps farmers recognize that they can too adopt this practice through the adoption of an alternative watering source. And I would note that this particular technology, the use of a flexible, transportable, solar-powered watering system, is now being studied in Virginia to be incorporated as part of the cost share reimbursement system. So it's really very exciting, and we're very proud of the work that Matt and Austin have done in connection with it. Many of you know that another key practice that our colleagues are working on across our agricultural regions is to increase forested and vegetated buffers along waterways like the one that you see in this photograph. Always, volunteers have been an enormous and indispensable part of the process of planting these trees. And we have been able recently to begin to restart up some of these processes despite the slowdown that we implemented on a cautious basis due to the coronavirus. So we're really happy about that. People like to do it. Farmers like it when they have help putting these trees on the ground, and it keeps our message vibrant and a key part of our outreach to the community. In this connection, I am very excited to let you all in on what we consider to be very exciting breaking news. Just a few days ago, we learned that the Virginia Environmental Endowment has awarded the Bay Foundation a $1.1 million grant, which will enable the Bay Foundation to add 200 some acres of streamside buffers in the Upper James River watershed over the next 3 years. It's a very significant grant. From my perspective, it's a very significant sign of the trust that our grant-making entities, including Virginia Environmental Endowment, place in CBF, and it will enable us to make significant headway in meeting our riparian buffer goals. Our work with Virginia farmers encompasses many practices, as you have seen. It encompasses volunteers, as you have seen, and it also encompasses efforts that we think are becoming very meaningful to reach out to some of the diverse communities in our agricultural context. I'm going to show you just a really short video about a farm operation in Clarke County. I don't think it needs more introduction, but I hope you enjoy this video.
Take care of, and again, we had pigs, we had sheep, we had cows, we had everything. You know, you learn a lot of valuable lessons on a farm of that size. You learn about hard work, you learn about family, you learn about the land, you learn about, you know, being a handyman, a carpenter, or an electrician, a plumber. Farmers got to do it all. My grandfather was one of the most amazing human beings I've met in life, man. He was just so humble. He was nice. He was pleasant. He always had a smile on his face, always. I never see my grandfather angry. My grandfather passed away. My dad is running the farm right now. He's added some additional animals to the farm. We now have sheep because they can graze together with cattle. We have pigs, we have chickens, and now we're trying to ramp up and go into a larger scale production of vegetables. So at the height of agriculture for African Americans in my county, there were 5 major farmers. A lot of them have disappeared, like a lot of things. As a result, right now we are one of 2 African American family farms in Clarke County, Virginia. I've recently helped a friend. I'm a licensed real estate agent. I recently helped a friend purchase his family's farm, and now there's 2 African American farms in Clarke County, Virginia. Farming is just really God's work. The land is God's blessing to us, so we must preserve the land. We must take care of it, because when we take care of it, it'll take care of us.
Chesapeake Bay Foundation was recently contacted by Last Standing Farm to get some help in putting in a rotational grazing system for their livestock. A rotational grazing system is simply a way of dividing your pasture into smaller units. You only give the livestock access to one part of your pasture at a time, and that allows the rest of the pasture to rest.
So Matt came out there, he helped my dad install some fence. And I was like, man, this only makes sense, man. Rotational grazing has been really phenomenal for our family, because like a lot of things, we can let a lot of our pastures rest.
So while it's resting, it's growing more leaves above ground, and it's growing more roots below ground. Benefits to that? Well, those roots growing below ground are more able to absorb water when it does come, so that can help the farmer take advantage of rains. It can also lessen runoff and lessen pollution entering our local waterways. The benefits to the farmer are that the livestock are using more of the forage when they're in those smaller pasture units. It's also a lot easier to let the livestock harvest the forage themselves than to cut hay, store hay, then redistribute hay to feed hay to your animals.
I anticipate reduction in fuel costs, a better managed farm, and happier cows, which will lead to a more productive farm operation.
The Chesapeake Bay Foundation is part of the Mountains to Bay Grazing Alliance, and we are working from Pennsylvania through Maryland and Virginia to help livestock farmers institute rotational grazing systems.
No, I just want to say thank you to Chesapeake Bay Foundation for all the work that you've done. You guys have been nothing but a blessing to our family. Like I said, Matt is just phenomenal. Great person. My dad fell in love with. He actually looks for Matt on, where's Matt at, Corey?
So I must say, every time I see that video, I am more and more impressed at the work that Matt did and the terrific agricultural producers that he has had the opportunity to be with. I'm going to change the location of our work, moving east to focus on another project that I think many of you have heard a lot about. That's the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. As you will remember, the plan for this pipeline, intended to carry natural gas, was to cross a wide swath of Virginia, from the mountains, frankly, to the North Carolina coast and beyond, with another spur that would take gas to the bay in Chesapeake. And I will say that the Bay Foundation looked on this pipeline proposal with great concern from the very moment we heard about it. Concerns focused on its clear environmental impacts. We recognized there would be serious forest fragmentation through some of the most important forests in the East Coast, George Washington National Forest, among others. We also recognized there would be serious and frankly unpreventable water quality damage as the pipeline trench was cut through very rugged terrain and in the face of sediment that would arise because our regulatory programs are frankly not capable of stopping it. We were concerned as we looked at it more and more about the air pollution that would arise from the compressor stations that would be built, one of them in Buckingham County. And we were concerned about the impact of this pipeline on all the communities along the way. As it turns out, our concerns were both well-founded and took some surprising development and direction. The person you see in this photograph is named Richard Walker. Richard Walker is the descendant of some of the freed slaves who founded the community of Union Hill in Buckingham County shortly after the Civil War. He and his neighbors make up the population of this small town, which is currently majority minority, and is located about 30 miles south of Charlottesville. In this tiny community, the pipeline proposal was to build a compressor station, which would run on 4 large turbines running natural gas 24 hours a day, emitting constant noise, emissions into the air of greenhouse gases, and other pollutants, some of which would ultimately end up on the waterways in the bay, exacerbating the nutrient pollution problems we already have. Also, given the proximity of this facility to the community, the compressor station posed serious threats in terms of disproportionate health impacts on the residents. We made all of our concerns known repeatedly to the relevant regulators, the Department of Environmental Quality, the State Water Control Board, the State Air Pollution Control Board, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. There were many stops and starts, some small successes, some large successes, but ultimately, with respect to the compressor station, the State Air Pollution Control Board granted the relevant permit, apparently allowing for the construction of this key part of the pipeline. Chesapeake Bay Foundation and its partners decided that this was a ruling that could not stand, and we appealed this decision to the Federal Appeals Court in Richmond. What emerged from that very contentious hearing was a decision from the three-judge panel that both rejected the air permit, did so on the basis of a finding that the agency had failed to take into account the disproportionate effects on the community and the community's health when it cited and approved the siting of this facility. That stopped, I should say, that particular decision was one of the key things which we understand led to the pipeline ultimately being taken off the table by Dominion's affiliate and partners. That's terrific. We are really delighted about that. We think it made a difference in the life of that community and many others along the way. But what I would also note about that Fourth Circuit Appeals Court decision is that it actually was a key step in changing the law. The way that Virginia agencies now must look at decisions in terms of the siting of particular proposed facilities, it requires them to take a new, harder look on the disproportionate impact of these proposals on vulnerable and fence-line communities. It's a very important development in Virginia law.
Peggy, this is Laura. Real quick, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
We're having a little bit of problem hearing you. If you don't mind speaking up a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I'll come a little closer. And I want to move the venue, so to speak, to the Richmond metro region, talking about some things that we are doing in Richmond itself and in Hopewell, which exemplify another area of focus of our work, and that is expanding and preserving, where appropriate, the tree canopy that protects our communities and provides so many important ecosystem benefits. Trees, as you all know, I think mitigate localized flooding. They help to balance out the carbon dioxide and oxygen that we need in the air. They provide wildlife shelter and so many other things. So we are helping to increase those canopies. Here is one of the projects that we have been working on in the city of Hopewell. CBF conducted a really significant tree assessment, which showed how much canopy the city has, how much it could have, what needed to be done in order to increase it. And we ultimately planted 250 trees, adding those trees to the city's overall canopy. We trained tree stewards, and we have developed a plan working with the city to ensure that the city will maintain those new trees. We also helped in the same project to restore an eroding stream channel and put in a new wetland adjacent to that stream channel, all of which will help to ameliorate some of the heat island effects in the city of Hopewell, which is, as you know, a city with a great industrial background. Moving to Richmond, however, I would bring your attention to the work that we have done with the Second Baptist Church of South Richmond. This is a church in the Broad Rock neighborhood, south of the James. It's an aging industrial corridor with very large expanses of unmitigated pavement. The church itself has a massive roof expansion and a huge paved parking lot. Together, all of this impervious surface meant that the church would be paying $8,000 a year to the city of Richmond under its stormwater utility fee. The church itself is in the middle of a food desert. So, given these circumstances, the church leaders, church members, and CBF together worked out a strategy to attack many of these problems in one project. This project contemplated the building of a community garden. The garden would itself be fed from a new 10,000 gallon cistern positioned at the edge of the roof and capturing 2/3 of the roof's runoff, funneling it directly to the garden. The garden has there are three trenches built under the garden to further capture rain and facilitate infiltration. And in the project, we also removed 18 unnecessary parking spaces, ripping up the asphalt and installing a rain garden to filter the water coming off the rest of the parking. And what you see as part of the rewards of this very large project, you see the community garden, which is now being run entirely by the church members, and it has been used to help feed both church members and members of the broader community. It's a really exciting partnership with the Second Baptist Church. We're also in a nearby neighborhood in South Richmond, focusing again on trees and in particular on their connection to the possibility of alleviating urban heat islands. We have a new grant to do this work. We will start in January. We will be addressing some of the city's older neighborhoods, areas undergoing redevelopment with commercial corridors constructed prior to any kind of decent stormwater management regulations. This is an area too, I would note, that was once and for decades largely redlined. It's a matter of law. And under this very benighted process, the area was therefore deprived of investment. The Science Museum of Virginia took a look at the entire Richmond metro area and mapped out what it called the heat island effect, noting in some cases a 16-degree difference in the warmest places of the city during the hottest times of the day. And what you can see on this map is that the hottest parts of this area in the city, which are that dark red portion, form a kind of boomerang shape on the city map. They are industrial areas and they have very little tree cover. CBF's project focused on this boomerang area. And I would also note, I'm not sure you saw that I changed the slide there, but when I change the slide, what we see is a map of where heat-related illnesses are found. And again, that boomerang delineates in the dark red areas where we have the highest heat-related illnesses. That's the area where CBF will be focusing its work. It will be installing a large stormwater management facility at Branches Baptist Church. It will pull up some of the very large parking lots similar to what we have seen in another church area. We will be reforesting some of that section. CBF will be planting 250 trees at parks and in the surrounding community. It will install 5 conservation landscaping projects. All of this will be working with other partners who are helping to revitalize green spaces in some of Richmond's neighborhood. CBF, part of its work will be, as it usually is, designed to engage members of the community in this effort, educating them, and making them part of the solution. We will be doing that through a voices class and many different kinds of workshops for community members. Very excited about this project, which has gotten lots of local press. I think as we move further east, we'll just give you a few words on our Grasses for the Masses program, which Virginia CBF has been organizing for many years. This is a process to enable people to be directly part of the bay restoration work by planting underwater grasses at home, watching them germinate and grow, and then at the right season, planting them in appropriate places protected and permitted by the relevant agency. This is a photograph that was taken just a few weeks ago when we were collecting grasses seeds for our growers to use over the winter. So we will continue our trip east in Virginia, this time landing for a few minutes in the city of Hampton. where CBF is proud to have been able to partner with the city and with the capital firm Quantified Ventures to introduce and help structure an environmental impact bond for the purpose of facilitating green infrastructure projects in the city. You may know of impact bonds. These are essentially a new tool in the financing toolbox. The idea is to attract capital from those people who are interested in ensuring good environmental outcomes for their investments. And they are characterized by enabling flexible terms that are dependent on and tied to agreed performance metrics. It has been a very challenging process to figure out how to make this financing tool work in the context of the city's planning and budgeting processes, but the city is committing to do it. The bond was developed and designed. All parties had appropriate financial and legal advisors. The bond has issued, and now that we will be able to watch and to assist the city in putting in the kinds of green infrastructure that's desired. That will include bioswales, pervious pavement, green roofs, rain gardens, constructed wetlands in some of the busiest parts of the city, all in an effort to help mitigate some localized flooding problems that the city is dealing with. Very excited about this environmental impact bond project. And continuing in the city of Hampton, CBF has been able to partner with Hampton University. We've hired students, some of whom you see in this picture, to help us grow oysters and to test water quality and results on oyster health to determine where are the best places to further our oyster restoration efforts. Now, many of you know that CBF is devoted to oysters. I think you are aware that we have worked on oysters for years as a single entity, and that we are now engaged in a massive multi-partner project called the Chesapeake Bay Oyster Alliance. We've got lots to, frankly, be happy about. This picture focuses on one of our early successes, and that's in the Lafayette River, which is the first Virginia tributary to attain a very important and exciting designation of being fully restored for oysters. It's hard to get that designation. You have to show, among other things, that 50% of the tributary's currently restorable bottom is covered with functioning oyster reefs and a few other similar characteristics. In doing this work in the Lafayette River, CBF partnered with many groups, including the Elizabeth River Project, and we together installed 12 new oyster reefs and seeded many of them with spat-on shells, some 70 million spat. It's a very exciting and remarkable achievement. We didn't stop with the Lafayette. We are doing significant work on what we could call our very own home river, the Lynnhaven, right next to the Brock Environmental Center. At the Lynnhaven, we are excited to have recently gotten word of being awarded grant monies from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for the third and final phase of an oyster restoration project in the Lynnhaven. We're working together with our partner Lynnhaven River now, and we will create 26 acres of new oyster reef stocked with 25 million spat-on shell that we'll be able to brag about once this project is completed. We think that the Lynnhaven River stands to become the second tributary in Virginia fully restored for oysters. We're also looking at oyster restoration in the Nansemond River in the city of Suffolk. one of the things that our staff and volunteers are working on there is to test out different substrate options. You've seen before reef balls. What you see here are oyster castles, and there's several other options that we've been using to determine which are the best options to use in this tidal river. We are looking not only at oyster propagation, but we're also looking at the ability of marrying our oyster restoration work with living shoreline work. And we are hopeful that some good solutions will come out of this project. This is an activity where our volunteers are playing a huge role. And we're proud in particular to bring you this picture, which features some of our oyster gardening volunteers. This is a program many of you are familiar with. Volunteers are given materials to grow oysters from their home, off their dock typically. They keep them there for a year and then return them to CBF, which then plants them on sanctuary reefs. So everyone is part of this process. This picture shows volunteers who are members of the Nansemond Indian Reservation. So to the Indian Nation. We're delighted to have them as part of our, if you will, army of oyster gardeners. It would not be Virginia, it would not be CBF if I failed to mention Menhaden Management and the successes that we have had in the last year. What you see depicted in this slide are two things very important. One is Chris Moore, our senior ecosystem scientist, who has been spearheading, along with colleague Allison Colden in Maryland, CBF's efforts to protect Menhaden, the most important fish in the bay. Chris has been at this for 20 years, and he has made huge success of this work with volunteers, with legislators. He's speaking there to the Virginia House of Delegates, Chesapeake and Agriculture Committee, which plays a key role in this work. He's there at a moment of success. The success is in the effort to ensure that the Menhaden fishery is managed not by the Virginia General Assembly, which focuses on political considerations, but is transferred to the Marine Resources Commission, which they finally agreed to do after 20 years. So I show you this slide with great pride at CBF's success, at Chris Moore's particular effort in bringing about that success, and frankly, congratulations to Virginia for getting it right on this really important fishery. I know many of you are Virginians. I suspect that many of you followed what should have been a 2-week session, a special session this summer, ended up being about a 2-month session. It was a session that was convened to address a couple of important crises in Virginia, both the demands of responding to the COVID pandemic and also the need to really step up to the plate in addressing long-standing racial equity concerns. This was a session where CBF's priorities in terms of natural resources protection were not front and center. And I say that it was a conscious decision. We recognized the priorities of the Commonwealth, and we supported our legislators in taking care of those priorities. But the critical thing I would say from a natural resources perspective to take away is that despite this work, despite the, frankly, emergency situations that faced legislators, they still maintained the important investments that were appropriated last spring for our key bay restoration programs. I congratulate our legislators for their work in doing that. and I take from it some comfort that we will continue to have a deepening commitment to getting the job done. And that's where we are now. We are in the process of preparing for the regular session that will begin in January. This will be an important session. It is the beginning of the last 5-year period as we work to meet our blueprint goals. Because of that, our appropriations, our financial support goals are front and center. We will need $100 million a year, every year for the next 5 years to support some of the ag programs that you have seen our colleagues working on in the western part of the state. We will need upwards of $80 million a year to be spent in addressing the problems associated with urban and suburban development, the vast expanses of impervious surface across the landscape, in addressing our stormwater management system. We will need upwards of $50 million a year to ensure that Virginia continues the work in upgrading its wastewater treatment plants, particularly in the York and James watersheds, which have so far lagged behind. That's what we'll be telling our legislators. We hope they will be listening and trust that they will be. That's not the end of our agenda, however. We will be working on lifting some of the limitations on localities' efforts to expand tree canopy. We will be seeking funds to conduct an oyster stock assessment to figure out what oysters we've got in a scientific way and what more we need to do to enhance the oyster population to where it needs to be. We will be working to continue some of the really important environmental justice gains made over the last year. I identified one that grew out of the Buckingham litigation, but in particular, we want to make sure that our agencies working in the environmental sphere have the staffing and the direction to, in fact, implement environmental justice imperatives, making sure that our vulnerable communities have a voice that is heard and that is respected, and that they are not subjected to disproportionate impacts as Virginia makes environmental permitting decisions. So, having, if you will, come full circle back to the General Assembly session in January, that's the end of my presentation, and I thank you for your attention. I apologize for some noise that we had going on outside, and I would love to answer any questions that you all may have.
Fantastic. Peggy, thank you so much for all of that great information, and thank you everyone for bearing with us for some of the sound issues. We're constantly learning on these things every time we do a Zoom webinar. So we thank you for bearing with us. Peggy, I do have 2 questions for you so far. Everyone else, please continue to, there's a lot of information shared. As you get more questions, to shoot them in through that Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So I will start with this first one. What area of the Upper James River will be restored through the grant that you discussed?
So it's a 4-county area that includes Botetourt, it includes parts of, actually, right offhand, I can't remember, but it's areas that are drained by tributaries to the James, including the cow pasture, the calf pasture, and the Jackson rivers. So all of those smaller tributaries drain into the James, and the lands that are drained by those smaller tributaries will be available and will be certainly areas where we hope farmers will join the effort. All the costs of this buffer project will be paid by the grant, so it's a very appealing grant for producers and a huge opportunity for them to take advantage of.
That's fantastic. Our next question is about oysters restoration. What is the minimum size of a restoration site in order for it to be considered a reef?
Well, that's a technical question. I actually can't answer it specifically, but we'll get you that answer. And what I would ask you to do, and I think Laura can help me with this, is we will make sure that I consult with our expert. We have several of them, you know, and one of them you saw there, Chris Moore. He'll know the answer to that question. And I'll learn that answer too.
Yeah, when in doubt, ask Chris Moore.
That's right.
All right. Are there any other questions from the group? Just want to be sure. I'll give everyone a couple minutes to hear too. Here we go. We're getting some more. From Tori Deedle Hops. Has CBF done scenario planning around the outcome of our presidential election? Very timely question, Tori.
What I will say is this. It's a watershed-wide, a CBF-wide effort to always respond to what we see on the ground in terms of our political structure and what we anticipate are likely outcomes so that we are ready with appropriate efforts, right? As you know, CBF is nonpartisan. We always work with legislators and decision makers on both sides of the aisle. We have friends on all sides. So as a general matter, we are prepared. I think many of you are aware that in terms of our national response, CBF has been in a very robust way taking a look at the barrage of regulatory rollbacks that have occurred under this administration. We have commented in a formal way on each of those that affect our bay restoration efforts. We have also engaged in litigation on key efforts where we think litigation is necessary. And so in that way too, we are and have been working to prepare to preserve what we need and to go forward with reinstituting what we consider to be necessary steps in terms of our regulatory process. It is certainly possible that many in CBF are having conversations, as we always do, with people who are part of transition teams, should that be an eventuality. So we are ready, I would say we are as ready as we can be for the outcome that we hope to find out as soon as possible next week.
I think we'll all be happy once we find out. We have a question from April Strickland. Can you tell us a little bit about the work being done related to wastewater treatment plants, including plans for improvements to help protect waterways?
So, a subject, strangely enough, dear to my heart. Virginia's been working on wastewater upgrades in a really concerted way for the last 15 years. A lot of that work began in the Potomac River, and for a very good reason. The Potomac River issues into the bay, kind of in the mid-bay region, where some of the most concerning oxygen levels were found. A lot of that work has been completed, and there are wastewater plants along the Potomac that we frankly brag about because they are operating now at a level that is considered above the level, more sophisticated than the so-called nominal level of technology. The James River, I think you know, has the longest river in Virginia. It is a river that spans our agricultural regions and some of the most important industrial regions in the state. With issues into the bay, the southernmost point. And so some of that pollution goes out into the ocean. Some of it is swept up into the mid-bay area, but it has a different and somewhat reduced effect on the dissolved oxygen in the middle of the bay. So it was postponed. Upgrading those plants was postponed as compared to those on the Potomac. Now we need to focus on the James, and we need to focus for similar reasons on the York River. The Virginia Watershed Implementation Plan that the governor's administration produced describes how this process will be conducted. And it's a fairly detailed analysis, figuring out, what is the most cost-effective way to reach the goals that will protect both bay water quality and local water quality in these two river systems, the James and the York. It reached a bit of a hiccup in the General Assembly session last year when legislators were not sure. They were yet persuaded that the governor's way was the best way. And so the Department of Environmental Quality with stakeholders, including CBF. And in this regard, I would point to our senior scientist, Joe Wood, who's played a hugely important role. We've been looking at all those possibilities. We expect that the agency will produce a document and a new draft permit that covers all these facilities that will achieve the goals that we need to have met over the next 5 years. So we're pretty excited about it. We're really proud of the work within CBF that Joe Wood has done. And we are frankly on the verge of being proud of the work that Virginia has done. We'll let you know in a few months where, when it all materializes on paper, but it's been a big effort and one that's important to Virginia's success.
Great. We do have an answer, Peggy, on our reef question. And thank you to one of our attendees for getting this. Chris says an answer to the size of reef. And again, the question was, what is the minimum size of a restoration site in order for it to be considered a reef? And of course, the answer is there isn't a specific definition, but I would tend to say 1/4 of an acre. So there we have it. And then unfortunately, we're running out of time and we won't get to this last question, but we'll get to it in our follow-up email you'll get from us. But that is, unless you can answer it in a minute, Peggy, what is being done about the lack of restoration in Pennsylvania and New York concerning the CBF goals?
Okay, so that is a long question. It requires a long answer. So I'll just say it is a focus and has been a focus of our work for the last several years in a really concentrated way. We've done a whole lot of things. We're really proud of the work that we've done, but I agree with Laura. I think to give that work justice, we'll have a longer answer. And I think Laura will be able to facilitate our getting to you in written format, the outline of that work, and to make sure that you know what you need to know. And if you have more questions, you can follow up on it.
Exactly right. We'll definitely follow up with you about that question. With that, I'd just like to say, Peggy, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing all this great information with us. Thank you to everyone who joined in the call. You're all supporters of CBF, and on behalf of all of us at CBF, thank you so much. We can't do all this great work that Peggy described without your support. So we are very, very grateful. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you for joining us. And, just go on, everybody be safe, happy, and healthy. And hopefully we'll be able to see you all in person soon. So thank you.
Look forward to that. Yeah. Thank you all.